योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्.
I, Dr. Narendrakumar D. Vasawa, express my heartfelt gratitude to UGC, University Grants Commission, Human Resource Development Center of Gujarat University, Ahmedabad, for providing me with an opportunity to connect with you and deliver my session on sex education, pros and cons. At the outset, I thank Professor Jagdish Joshi, Professor and Director of University Grants Commission, Human Resource Development Center of Gujarat University, Ahmedabad. I also acknowledge the entire team of HRDC, Gujarat University, for the cordial communication and arrangement. And it is very clear that the team effort has made Human Resource Development Center vibrant and popular in the state of Gujarat and nationwide. At this juncture, I place a note of record that Human Resource Development Center HRDC Gujarat University has ranked first in Gujarat. It is the first of its kind online refresher course in India in the year 2018-19, and about 2,500 participants have attended this particular online refresher course very successfully. And it is a matter of congratulation to the entire team and their team effort. The HRTC Gujarat University organized first of its kind online annual refresher program in English language teaching. We fondly know it as ARPIT, with record break of 9,000 participants in the year 2019 and 20. That is also a matter of pride for us to recognize HRDC Gujarat University. University Grants Commission Human Resource Development Center Gujarat University was founded by MHRD, and it is funded by MHRD under RUSA grant of rupees 3.33 crores, which is a huge amount. It is one of the very few HRDCs which have very faithfully and successfully organized the program under it. It has collaborated with well known and reputed institutions like IIMA, SPIPA, IIT Delhi, IIT Mumbai, Jawaharlal National University, fondly known as JNU, Delhi University, Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, Mumbai University, Narsi Mohanji Institute of Management, InflibNet, SNDT Mumbai University, St. Xavier's College Mumbai, NCRT, and UGC, and many other well known institutions are uh, well known with this institution. And UGC HRDC Gujarat University is affiliated and associated with well known institutions. With this brief note, I once again take this opportunity to welcome all dear brothers and sisters to the refresher course. Dear brothers and sisters, today we have noticed that the children and youth are different than what we were at their age, in the sense that we see the newer generation, which is future oriented, they tend to be more and more comprehensive, global, and as well as they are universal. They attach a great value to the virtue of friendship and commitment to the relationship that are rooted in impartiality, team spirit, freedom from rigidity and conventions, dogmas, and all other conflicts of ideology that prevent free inquiry, leading up to discoveries and inventions that will subserve the ideals of mutuality and harmony. That particular generation, their boundaries tend to be crossed by the travels and fresh experiences. Correspondingly, the teachers of today and tomorrow have to be different in their roles, have to be more uh, stringent and multi sided, devoted to the development of integral personality, wide vision of the future of nationalism and also internationalism, and capable of fulfilling the role of teacher as exemplar, as a friend, philosopher, and guide, as a scientist, as a psychologist, as artist, and also as a technologist, and above all, an ideal communicator who can spread uplifting influence by process of awakening and inspiration and conti- contagious enthusiasm. Having said that, in this context, over the last 2 decades, the sensitive issue has been discussed all over, talked about it, criticized. That is, whether there should be sex education in the school or there should not be. Many thinkers and educators have their opinion and understanding of the issue. It is difficult to neglect the issue and quite difficult to admit it very easily. In this dogmatic situation, let us understand what is what it is and why we and the stakeholders should know about it. The sex education, its importance. Dear brothers and sisters, let us think it very positively, saying that the sex education, why it is education? Because often in our Indian tradition, it is believed and fragmented, saying that it comes naturally. Okay, we can believe it to some extent, to some people, it may come naturally, but often it is drastic to accept that it comes natural. Let us understand the basic concept and meaning of sex education. When we talk of a sex education, it clearly appears from the term sex education, which is this is a kind of education which is about the sexual behavior of humans. And let us accept the fact that the sex is a God's gift of bringing about newer generation to this beautiful planet. In some part of the world, parents, caretakers, or the schools offer the sex education in the schools who are entering into the teenager years or the teenage age. If it is formally taught as a full course in high school, either middle school or that school level, or its chapters may be added in health, home economics, or in biology subject. Teaching of sex is somewhat diverse issue. Debates are being conducted from many decades for discussing the matter that formally should be taught in middle and high school or no. We are in the situation of confused state whether to accept sex education in our country, in our schools, to our children, or not to accept it in our schools, in our environment, and to our children. The act of informing younger and teenagers about sex is called sex education. This issue is one of the diverse issue of education. Since long ago in the institutions, it is not only about sex, it is also related to sexuality, sexual reproduction, sexual health, and rough attitude with their children or with her children. That is why it becomes a responsible matter to handle this issue. Frequently, sex education in schools is considered as a playful course. When it is taught in the schools, when we teach in our schools, it becomes humorous. People are laughing, people are making mockery of it, and we finish the class. Then we consider it a sober issue. We have never considered it so long as a sober issue in our schools. In schools, there are a lot of advantages and disadvantages of being taught sexual education. In older days, in olden times, people simply avoided talking about sex. Sex that is beyond our understanding, sex that is not in our purview, sex that is not to be talked about. Nowadays, the teenagers start to have a great interest in this debate from very immature ages. Due to the technology, information, communication, and technology has brought this issue in the debate purview quite easily. You see Facebook, you see YouTube channels, you see Twitter, you see Instagram. All these channels offer sex talks, quite approachable. Now, everyone is well aware about the fact that it becomes necessary for the parents to make understand the children about the education of sex. But there is no schedule in the school for this type of education. We all witness that there is no class, there is no understanding, there is no explanation about sex. In fact, in the textbook, in fact, in the biology, when the chapter comes, it is skipped off. It is not discussed. It is given as a part of assignment without endorsing it into school. This education cannot be taught in homes. No parents wants to talk about sex to their children. To educate the teenagers in the schools, this decision can only be made by the school systems. This is just one of the many considerations on this important social subject. Brothers and sisters, let us understand and let us rethink about a history or historical dimensions. The origin of sex education is still controversial. However, discussion and debates on a national level on what and how to teach children about sex existed as early as 1912. Actually, in the year 1912, the National Education Association recommended that teachers should be trained to provide this education in school itself. In the year 1940, the Public Health Service, known as PHC, of USA had made a strong statement about its importance. This statement was actually a result of concern over the spread of sexually transmitted diseases among many soldiers and sailors during the World War First and the World War II. Finally, in the year 1950 and the decade of 50s, American Medical Association joined hands with National Education Association to publish a series of pamphlets about its needs, and those pamphlets became the basis of most school-based sex education program. This is very briefly to talk about the historical perspective of sex education. A common question comes into our mind: why should sex education be taught in a school? Why can't it be taught in homes, families, neighborings? Why it should be taught in the school? One school of thought says that the kids are not getting the right amount of sex information at home. Many people may get, many kids may be getting sex education at home. There is no doubt about it. Due to the evolution of time, demand, many parents have become educated and aware, and they do make efforts to educate their children about sex, but not all. And the school is only the place that can deliver required education to the kids, because there is a homogeneous group present in the school, very kind of characters are being placed in the school, and the school is a school is a place where the atmosphere can be created by a teacher, where the teacher is respected, and therefore this teacher can impart this proper education for sex to the kids. If a proper delivered in a school, there are less chances of a kid to indulge in the sense or in the kinds of activities and other unethical activities. It actually helps the children to understand sex, to understand the consequences of sex in their young age. This prevents sex disease at young age, and therefore sex education should be taught in schools. Now, dear brothers and sisters, it is like a coin having two sides. There are a lot of advantages as well as there are a lot of disadvantages of sex education in schools. Let's talk about the advantages first. The first thing is it is information source. In order to have a proper, well rounded education, young students also need to get educated about their own body, their own structure. The human reproductive system also should be tackled. Diseases that can be transmitted sexually should be made aware. Pregnancy, contraceptives, etc., should be taught, and therefore it is information source. In case of no reliable source of information, young curious minds can look for the information from many sources. If the source is positive, well and good. If the source is not positive, if the source is negative, then it may lead to deviant behavior. And the negative sources are at present porn films. The second advantage is awareness and education. When this blend together, it assists human beings. Human beings need to learn how to act in their sexual relationships. Sex education in schools give them the awareness about to discern between myths and realities regarding sex, and do's and don'ts of sexual relationships, to respect another person, etc., could be awareness and also could be the education. And this important part of education creates individual with strong morals, and therefore this awareness and education should be blended together in any form of awareness program. The third advantage is prevention of sexually transmitted diseases. Sexually transmitted diseases are a dark reality, and owing to the inadequate measures of control over themselves, young couples engaging in unprotected sexual encounters fall prey to it easily. Sex education the pro- teaches them properly about the unprotected sex, and it serves and it brings them away from dangers associated with this kind of a phenomenon. They learn about contraceptives and that can stop sexually transmitted diseases. Further advantage is to avoid teenage pregnancy. The rates of teenage pregnancy have increased quite a lot, and this phenomenon can prove to be determinantal for young souls. However, studies have shown that teenagers are far less likely to get pregnant if they undergo sex education classes than if they do not attend the classes. And the programs teaching prevention techniques are generally more successful. Dear brothers and sisters, it is also observed that the festive season of Gujarat, specifically the Navaratri, after which teenagers become more pregnant. And it is a doctor's report saying that basically after this festive season, the cases increase. Another advantage is safe sex. Sex education teaches the importance of practicing safe sex. This helps not only when people are young and at school, but also when they are adults. Difference, it is very important. It is not only for adults or no, it is not only for teenagers, it is for the both human race. Studies have shown that a great percentage of students either stopped or greatly reduced the amount of unprotected sex they engaged in before the start of the class. And therefore, what is safe sex, why it is important, should be taught in the schools. Another advantage, it is reducing sexual activity. Sexual intercourse brings with it its own set of complications, and people engaging in it should be completely aware of the responsibilities that comes with sex. We also need to recognize and realize the marriage bondages, marriage relationship. The holy relationship should be taught to the kids, to the teenagers, and also should be practiced by young. Young students learn these responsibilities through sex education and can understand the importance of waiting to engage in sex till they are adults and capable of handling the sexual activities. And therefore, sexual knowledge or sex education should be imparted. Another advantage is consent. Human beings must understand the extreme importance of the consent far before ever engaging in any sexual activity. The consent is must. And therefore, there was a Hindi movie, and the caption was very famous. No means no, since the activity involves two people. The consent of both individuals is of utter importance. It is crucial. This is something that sex education classes engrave into the minds of young students, setting them up to the great individuals, respecting individuals, honoring individual privacy, and therefore this consent is a benefit. Next advantage is help with biology. Sex education classes in schools often give the students a well-rounded education about the autonomy of human body. This is not only helps them to understand their own physical bodies better, but these classes also can assist with their biology education, complete with, and it also competes with examinations, assignments, etc. And grading that can help or that can add up to their graduation credits. Another important feature is communication. Sex education helps young people, young students, teenagers to open up more about the problems they might be having in their sexual relationships and or their sexuality as a whole. Often people are unwilling to share these problems with their parents, and therefore in the school a teacher can be a counselor to them, but they feel more comfortable in talking to their teachers of the sex education classes. And therefore, the atmosphere should be created by the teachers, a very conducive atmosphere. Another and the last beneficiary aspect is lasting effects. There is a taboo that sex is often made out of or to be. Sex term itself is carrying a taboo in our society. Many people can be having several problems regarding their sexual relationships, sexuality, etc. But never understand the problems and know what to do. Learning about sex properly from an early age can help the person to grow into much more complete individual. So these are the advantages that one can complement, one can face, one can integrate into the life. Now let us focus on the disadvantages of sex education in schools. Dear friends, as we know that we come from Indian society, Bharatiya Sanskriti is quite rigid in the sense of talking about sex. And there could be a little more challenges to a teacher. What could be the challenges? What could be the problems faced by a teacher or by the stakeholders? Dear friends, the first challenge or the first disadvantage one could face is the class control. Controlling a sex education class can be a very tricky situation, and therefore in early part of a lecture we have talked about saying that when a chapter comes in a biology talking about sex, talking about intercourse, the teachers normally give it in a form of assignment because they find it very difficult to control the class. Young students do not necessarily want to maintain discipline, and the subject might be embarrassing to them. They might get overly excited. These are the possibilities, and a teacher has to control this. The students can resort to lightning and pass inappropriate comments, creating an inhospitable environment for this beautiful and a sensitive topic. And therefore, class control could be an could be a disadvantage or could be a kind of a huge challenge. The second challenge or a disadvantage could be a religious belief. As I talked, Bharatiya Sanskriti is based on a kind of a Sanskriti. that is also engulfed with a lot of religious beliefs. The subject of the classes can not only hurt the morals and the religious belief of an individual, but also can make him or her want to discontinue the class because of religious understanding. Also, several religious beliefs and practices include absenteeism, marriage before sex, etc. While most sex education classes teach the art of practicing safe sex. The third disadvantage could be teaching or teachers training. This is common occurrence where an educational institution introducing sex education classes instead of hiring specialists and rendering the responsibility to the regular teachers. Often institutions do not hire delegates that they are responsible of teaching the classes to their pre-existing staff. Inadequate training in these subjects can lead to young students' knowledge about the subjects being improper and unfinished, defectful, or whole purpose of the classes would deteriorate, and therefore trained teacher, trained counselor needs to be hired. Another challenging part is a guardian attitude. The attitude of guardians, religious leaders, etc., can often be very negative towards sex education classes, as they can feel that there the wards are being introduced to the subject that they were better off not knowing. This phenomenon can create severe conflict within the young impression mind to the students. Another important consent is that the guardians in Indian tradition feel and believe that the students or their children should not be exposed to sex. They should not be exposed to these terminologies, and these terminologies are harmful, is the belief prevailing in all the guardians. And therefore, it becomes very difficult to convey this message to the students. Another challenge or another uh, setback is inadequate education. In the absence of the implementation of comprehensive sex education, the classes cannot truly be effective. For example, in case teens are not taught adequate about proper use of birth control, they might still carry out the activity improperly and get pregnant, falling into severe problems that scare them for life. And therefore, education or sex education should be given to the fullest sense. Inadequate education, inadequate information may lead teenagers and young people in a severe problems that could be drastic to control and manage. The importance, the importance which is given less to the educational fraternity. Even before attending the classes, young students need to be made aware of the importance of sex education or sex education classes. Without that, students can often look at classes as simply recreational classes rather than treating the sensitive subject with the importance that it deserves. This can simply render the classes effectively. And therefore, dear brothers and sisters, the importance of sex education should be grieved, should be given more, should be authenticized. With these challenges, very few challenges, very common challenges, the subject being relatively quite sensitive. Sex education is a sensitive topic. Sex education in school is bound to have a number of disadvantages. We have talked about few advantages and few disadvantages. But the benefits of teaching young individuals about the subject far outweigh are the lessening the problems, and is something that should be definitely be adequate by more schools around the world. And it is a humble request, dear brothers and sisters, that let us introduce sex education. Now, at what extent, what level we are introducing, we never know. But that level, but that extreme, but that competency has to be developed by our own educational system. Let us be part of developing this system, and let's make this venture a collective venture in order to shape the future generations of our beautiful nation. It is said that India is the youngest country across the world. If we do not utilize this young asset, young importance, then we are the losers in the world. And it is my humble request, dear brothers and sisters, let us make collective efforts to go into this venture. Thank you so much. Namaskar. I, Dr. Narendrakumar D. Vasava, express my heartfelt gratitude to UGC Human Resource Development Center of Gujarat University, Ahmedabad, for providing me with an opportunity to reconnect with you and to deliver my session on sex education, the pros and the cons. Being an important topic, a topic of reflection, topic to be pondered over, topic to be thought over, I thank Professor Dr. Jagdish Joshi, Professor and Director of University Grants Commission, Human Resource Development Center, Gujarat University, Ahmedabad, for providing me with an opportunity to talk to you, to deliver to you about such a sensitive topic. I also acknowledge the teamwork of entire HRDC group, Gujarat University, for their tireless effort, cordial communication, and conducive environment provided to me, and I believe many others also, for this program. I believe this entire department is a vibrant department because of their initiative. We can see that number of participants have benefited from this entire course. And at this juncture, I place a note of record that Human Resource Development Center, HRDC, Gujarat University, has ranked first in Gujarat. The website of University Grants Commission, Human Resource Development Center, Gujarat University is very dynamic, very attractive, that provides a lot of information to the participants as well as to the resource persons. I'm happy to note that HRDC Gujarat University is also providing consultancy, is very innovative and establishing very nice training institutions. It is the first of its kind online refresher course in India. In the year 2018 and 19, about 2,500 participants have successfully attended the program. University Grants Commission, Human Resource Development Gujarat University is funded by well known organizations. It is also a stalwart institution in Gujarat that has contributed immensely in the development and progression of many other teachers. Let us come to the today's topic of discussion, or rather the lecture: sex education, the pros and the cons. Children are being subjected to neglect, abuse, violence, and exploitation. A society cannot ignore children abuse, as it is the biggest crime, and malicize the entire society. Rather, it must proactively work to prevent it. Thus, it is important in changing times to provide children with sex education so that they must be able to tackle any situation if it arises in future. Dear brothers and sisters, let us discuss about the rising child sexual abuse and the need of sex education in India. We will also talk about a little bit of numbers that threaten us. Nearly 50% of boys and girls each face sexual abuse in their young lives, and especially in India. According to a survey by the Ministry of Women and Child Development Department, it is said that more than 50% children are vulnerable. It is the responsibility of adults to empower these young people with the knowledge to protect themselves against such abuse. And I believe you will agree with me with all these points. It is also important to sensitize child about women and others, and to teach them what is right and what is wrong. The ethical issues come into existence here. It is important to teach children about their roles and responsibilities towards one another, their role towards their families, and towards societies as in whole. A young boy or a girl who is just entering teenage age needs to learn all aspects about psychological and emotional changes that he or she will be going through while growing up. This information and awareness is absolutely essential for the young individuals in order to ensure that he or she can protect oneself from being sexually abused. It is due to this lack of information and awareness that children go through traumatic experience that range from sexual abuse to emotional and psychological abuse. Without knowing the implications of these or what recourses to take, and this leads to the victims being emotionally and sometimes physically scared for life. And therefore, it is the responsibility of the society to ensure that every boy and a girl is provided with the necessary information and is taught all the preventive and corrective measures to be taken in case of this eventually. There is a compelling need to increase the awareness of providing children with sexual education so that they can be equipped with the right vocabulary to talk about sexual abuse. Because Indian society has such an atmosphere wherein sex word carries a social taboo. Often people, children
are ashamed of talking about it because they do not have proper vocabularies. Skills learned through sexuality or sexual education will prepare children to recognize potentially important behavior. They will have appropriate behavior and they will fight against the abuses. The justice process appears frightening to the child survivals because no one has educated them about the practices of the court. Besides, unawareness of how and who to report to the abuse goes against their interest. Sex education will thus allow children to gain knowledge about the most effective ways to respond to the sexual abused. Having said that, let us understand sex education. Many thinkers have defined it in a broader sense that sex education is a broad and wide range of a program that aims to build a strong foundation for lifelong sexual health by acquiring information and attributes, beliefs, and values about one's identity, relationships, and intimacy. Sexual health is considered to be a state of physical, emotional, mental, and social well being in relation to sexuality and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity defined by World Health Organization. Psychological and socio-cultural influences in the delivery of this education can increase the likelihood of effectiveness. Primarily, during adolescence, that is from 10 to 19 years of age, it's a provision and its provision is a crucial preventive tool as it is the opportune time when young people experience developmental changes in their psychology and behavior as they enter adulthood. The complex emotional state in which youth find themselves in, stigma surrounding matter of a sexual nature in the Indian society, and widespread gender inequality faced makes it increasingly challenging for adolescents to attain the knowledge they need. Through what is termed as family life education, we can hope to teach the role and responsibilities of males and females towards each other in all relationships in familial and social context, and thus endowing the knowledge of necessary to maintain sexual health as they as they navigate through the vulnerabilities of life. However, the existence of strong stigma and controversy handicaps any existing adolescent health programs, with them being incorporative and incomprehensive and failing to fully address the main health issues adolescents are vulnerable to. These include several negative sexual and productive health outcomes, such as early and closely spaced pregnancy, unself abnormalities, abortions, sexually transmitted infections, HIV, AIDS, and sexual violence, the rates of which are already increasing at a disturbing rate. Dear brothers and sisters, there are challenges to sex education in India because of socio-cultural setup of our society. A deep-rooted sense of morality binds the sentiments of large population from seeing the benefits and necessities of launching such an education program throughout the country. It is largely believed that talking about sexuality and its awareness may instead corrupt young adolescents. It may be recognized there can be one size fit all approach. Given the sensitivity of the topic, each state or region would need to be handled specific to their value system and cultures. Socially acceptable norms in one region could be a taboo in another. So it is difficult to design a nationally accepted curriculum on sex education. These are the challenges, dear brothers and sisters, when we talk of sex education to be imparted in schools. Going further, let us understand the role of a family, school, and teachers in preventing child sexual abuse in the society. First, let us concentrate, let us focus on role of a family. Parents should equip children with information and skills to build self-protective behavior. They must be available when children need to talk. As we all witness, the present way of life is such that we do not have time for our kids. Rather, we are engaged in social, office, and work life. Parents must keep visiting their child in the school to ensure accountability of teachers and staff. That is a role of a family. They must teach their child about how to keep themselves safe and what is an abuse. And specifically, the family members, especially mother and father, should talk about sexual abuse. We parents often think that we are more resourceful than anybody else. We have also believed so far that we are more knowledgeable, we are more resourceful, and we are more comfortable to our children. And if we believe so, we are more comfortable, we are more knowledgeable, and we understand our kids more than anybody else, then it is a ethical responsibility of every parent to talk, to teach about sex education to our kids. Dear brothers and sisters, let us note that if we do not tell our children about sex education and sex, remember they have ample source or other sources that they would get information from these sources and they would understand, they would know. And there is always a danger that if they misunderstand, then there would be a huge problems. So far as when we talk about our own children, we see that when till our children come into this particular context, we are not sensitive. And therefore, it is an ethical responsibility of every parent to teach their kids about this education. It is important that family must keep a vigil on their relatives and neighborhood to prevent any kind of misbehave with their kids. It is important that parents must also keep a watch on child's peer group and friend circle and must ask tough questions from school teachers and principals to know about the safety for their children. Difference, there is another role of a school, that is a major role wherein we all of us are involved, the educational institutions. Schools, colleges, universities are at frontline of child or youth protection, since they have the potential to both teach proactive behaviors effectively and to greater number of children than any other system, including parental institutions. In a family, there may be two members teaching to one child, but in the school, there are number of teachers teaching to number of people, and the change can be brought drastically from this perspective. Schools must take interview process of teachers very rigorously and must do proper background checks on them, as teachers can also abuse children. Abuse must be punished harshly so that there could be a kind of examples set. Further, schools must appoint a special counselor to counsel students about right and wrong, and also to help children, youngsters, teenagers for post traumatical experiences. There is another role, that is the role of a teacher. Teachers have a special role in combating child sexual abuse, as they possess the knowledge, training, and opportunity to observe and respond to children's behavior and physical conditions over a period of time. Additionally, because of the close daily contact, they are in unique position to identify these children who need help and protection. They must impart sex education to children based on their age and level of maturity. Creating and strengthening a protective environment for children requires many level of engagements, which in turn demand a dialogue, partnerships, and coordination based on shared analysis. Child abuse is a stigma to the entire society. It is our duty to protect children, because children are the future of our country. If we want our nation to be strong, to be ethical, to be right, and if we wish our nation to be Vishwaguru, we ought to protect our children today and forever. The life of a child can be saved from abuse and can be changed with one's positive intervention. We all must have to prepare ourselves for this and know more about their problems, as well as what we can do for bettering our nation. Here, there is a matter of discussion. If we want to shape the future, let us understand pros and cons of sex education in schools. As we have talked, we have understood, and we have imbibed, saying every coin has two sides. Here, for sex education also, there are advantages and disadvantages. What are they? We need to understand. Being a responsible citizens and good educators, prudently we can decide what can be done for our kids, what can be done for our students, what can be done for our nation. Sex education is the most controversial problem or a topic in the education system. Some people agree to sex education, while some think it's still a taboo. This is not possible to shrug off the obligation of information or informing youth about its importance. Problems like sexual transmitted diseases, pregnancy, and assault can be avoided if being taught at school about it. This is a broad term elaborating education to human anatomy, sexual productive health, emotional relations, reproductive rights and responsibilities, abstinence, contraceptions, and other aspects of human sexual behavior should be taught and should be understood. Parents usually feel awkward talking about all this to the youngsters. Kids do not usually get the right amount of sex information at home, and the school is the only place that can help them or give enlightenment about education. Many thinkers have said that education is not merely teaching, it is bringing all round development, holistic development of children, of students. Hence, it is the responsibility of the schools to look into the subject matter. Let us understand some of the advantages and disadvantages. Let us first focus on the advantages. The spread of HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases in young adults is due to low rate of contraceptive use and the lack of information on sex or safe sex practices. Sex education can give some knowledge on preventing sexually transmitted diseases and the technique to use condoms for preventions. They are less prone to HIV infection since they have the necessary information and skills to protect themselves. Give insight and offer practical knowledge to avoid unwanted pregnancies and has resulted in great success in deterring it. Sex education helps young people, young adults, in preventing any sexual assaults and teaches students what is right and what is wrong. Not talking about sex education will create a significant impact on adolescents. Hence, talking about it can create a better influence on adolescents by being able to communicate, listen, negotiate with others, ask for and identify sources of help and advice. Having said this positive impact, there could be also cons of sex education in school. Educating youngsters about sex education goes a long way as it is a broad topic about our body, human reproductive system, sexually transmitted diseases, birth contraceptives, and pregnancy prevention techniques. There is a lack of skilled teachers in teaching sex education because some find it painful and discomforting to teach sex education topics in the school. Often, people perceive sex education as a recreational course and do not take it as serious as it should be taken. For many, this is against their moral and religious beliefs and their sentiments as an individual. Many schools do not teach as it becomes very tough to argue with people when they carry the faith to the forefront and hence prefer to go away this sensitive trouble untouched. Parents think that sex education could corrupt their kids, their children, and their children's moral standing and encourage them to uh, engage in sexual activities due to their curiosity. It is painful that many parents think that due to sex education, the children and the students will know about sex practices and they will indulge into it. There has been an argument raised by the opponents of sex education is that the prevention of too much or talking of sex education can ruin the innocence and make them think about it. Comprehensive sex education involves teaching on abstinence, safe sex practices, and sexual diversity. But most schools do not teach abstentions. They do not teach how to control. Instead, they focus on having safe intercourse, which family objects before marriage. There is a lack of sincerity in students as well. Students tend to think of this subject as embarrassing or ridiculous and hence do not pay attention to it or attend the institution. They either laugh about it or think of it as an entertaining subject. This might be difficult for teachers to teach about this subject. Although receiving sex education during the adolescent period can be not always practical but beneficial. It should not be removed from the school curriculum. It should approach as to how it is taught. Teenagers are already under the great uncontrollable pressure due to the new hormones flowing through their bodies. Although many believe intercourse should be avoided until finding a significant other bound of life by marriage. It is still important for adolescents to be informed about this new experience. Sex education is very important part of maturing from a teenager to an adult. But it is always beneficial to you. There are many pros and cons of learning about this at this particular age. Sex education is a pivotal moment in a teenager's growing years. It is a chance for students to learn proper safety techniques in order to prevent not only teen pregnancies but also sexually transmitted diseases, HIV, AIDS. Dear brothers and sisters, studies show males attending school who had received sex education were also more likely to be or to more likely to use birth control the first time they had sexual intercourse. The study has shown this. The study also found that there is no associations were found among females between receipt of sex education and birth control use. There are many people who have conducted studies and shocking findings have been found. These patterns varied among socio-demographic subgroups. One reason that some prefer to use both birth control, and others stay away, is due to the fact that although this one protection method does protect women from unplanned pregnancy, it cannot protect anyone from getting a sexual transmitted disease or a virus. Birth control, however, is not the only protection method. There are many other ways to stay safe from both unwanted situations. A very well known way to protect one's self during intercourse is the use of condoms, which provide a layer between body to body contact. This is not completely reliable, though, so a smart decision made between intimate couples is the use of both condoms for the birth control. However, as taught in most health cases, abstinence is the best option. People are extremely vulnerable to sexually transmitted diseases situation have shown that in a year back in 2015, a total number 2,29,750 babies were born to women of the age group between 15 to 19 years for a birth rate of 22.3% per 1,000 women in this age group. This just goes to show what can happen about having sex education in a school. Although there are many benefits of sex education in high school years, there are many benefits of having sex education in school years. It can also have it downside. Sex education, if not taught properly, can lead students to believe that intercourse before marriage is encouraged just because they are learning about it. Some people think that sex education gives students the knowledge of safe intercourse with parents, making them possibly believe that they should participate in these acts as well. This is not the case, however, or whatsoever. Sex education is meant to teach the dangers of sex, but students might look at what they are taught in different perspectives. Although there are many cons of sex education in schools, premature intercourse among teens is almost invisible, and therefore, receiving sex education in the adolescent years is very beneficial but not always effective. Sex education should not be removed from school curriculum, but there should be another approach as to how it is to be taught. With this little talk and a little discussion, I take this opportunity to thank HRDC Gujarat University for providing me with the opportunity to talk and discuss about this sensitive issue. Thank you.